Well, that spiraled out of control quickly. Is Macedonia Greek or Slavic? In a recent video, I talked about Alexander the Great and the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, the one that ended up uniting Greece and became the Hellenistic Empire. You know the one, Alexander the Great, all that stuff. And I wanted to investigate the evidence of what language they spoke. What was this Macedonian speech? And of course, given the evidence available, scant though it is, the conclusion that I have come to, and that many others have come to, is that the Macedonian dialect was akin to the other ancient Greek dialects, that it was more Greek than it was anything else. But I wasn't quite prepared for how many people from the Balkans, from Greece and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, among other places, also Albanians, insisted that Alexander the Great and his father Philip II were in fact something different than what history seems to show that they were. And this stunned me, not because I didn't understand the controversy, but simply by how vitriolic it is. But I should have known better, however, since the Balkans isn't necessarily known as being a happy place filled with flowery meadows and rainbow skies and rivers of chocolate where the children dance and laugh with gumdrop smiles. The Balkans, of course, happens to be one of the most amazing places in the world for its cultural diversity, linguistic diversity, even musical diversity. See Faria Faraji's channel to learn more about the amazing music of the Balkans. But for those of us outside of the Balkans, the extraordinary vitriol and the, shall I say, colorful interpretations of history probably surprise a lot of us. So the purpose of this video is to explain to those who live outside of the Balkans, what is this controversy over the name Macedonia? This is not an attempt to educate the people who live in the Balkans about the history that has gone on there. In fact, I'm quite sure that the majority of comments from the Balkans will be filled with various ideas and thoughts and opinions about this video. Still, I'm going to do my best to give a summary of this controversy about Macedonia and why it led to the changing of an entire country's name. I'm Luke, and this is polýMATHY. So what is this controversy about exactly? Essentially, we have two or more modern nation-states claiming to be the cultural, ethnic, linguistic descendants, in part or in whole, of the ancient Macedonian kingdom, the kingdom of Philip II and Alexander the Great. And why do they care? Because Alexander the Great, well, he was pretty great. He ended up doing a lot of glorious and famous things, and modern people like to associate themselves sometimes with glorious and ancient pasts. The issue is that the territory of the ancient kingdom of Macedonia does not lie only in one country, and therefore more than one country can say, yeah, we have Macedonia here, we have connections to ancient Macedonia. Let's go back before the fall of communism, back to, say, the 1980s. There we have the Republic of Greece, and to its north, the Social Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. So the way I like to think of the former Yugoslavia is like a tiny Soviet Union. It was not a part of the Soviet Union, but like the USSR, it was a communist entity, a union of different regions, in fact, of different ethnicities and languages, and the political divisions were socialist republics. The Socialist Republic of Serbia, the Socialist Republic of Croatia, the Socialist Republic of Macedonia. So why was that division called Macedonia? Well, because part of the ancient kingdom lies in Macedonia, or more specifically, in the ancient Roman province of Macedonia. The ancient kingdom of Macedonia is mostly located within modern Greece, while the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, that mostly corresponds to the ancient kingdom of Paeonia. Under Roman rule, Paeonia and ancient Thrace were incorporated into the province of Macedonia. In the 4th century AD, the Romans divided Macedonia into two new provinces, Macedonia Prima, which is the southern part, and Macedonia Secunda, which corresponds to the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and some parts of Bulgaria. And then under the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, this province was expanded and became the Diocese of Macedonia. Thus, many modern people living within current borders can claim Macedonia is where they stand. But which Macedonia? What time period? And what connection does that really have to the great Alexander and his father Philip II? And then in the 6th and 7th century, when the Slavic invasions into the Balkans began, the name Macedonia wasn't applied to anywhere in this area for about another 1,000 years. It wasn't until the late 19th and early 20th centuries that a resurgent idea of a Macedonian province, region, even linguistic or cultural identity even became a question again. Now, nothing wrong with that. There's also a region in northern Greece called Macedonia, roughly corresponding to the ancient kingdom. But this all starts in the early 20th century. The Ottoman Empire collapsed, Greece gained independence, and then there was a first Balkan War and a second Balkan War, and not everybody was happy with the results. Anyway, things got shuffled around, and all the way back then there was a movement to unite all the territories that were associated with the ancient kingdom of Macedonia under one nation state. Now, you can see why the Republic of Greece wouldn't necessarily like that very much, because it would mean, well, making all of that into not Greece anymore, but a different country called Macedonia, which, as we just mentioned, is actually part of another country called Yugoslavia. So the Greeks have always had a problem with the idea of Macedonia not being within Greece, because they saw this United Macedonia movement as an irredentist attempt to grab some of their land. Those in favor of the United Macedonia movement wanted to reunite what they saw as a single ethnic and linguistic and cultural entity. Now, given how incredibly mixed the Balkans have been, all the way since antiquity up to the present day, with languages and cultures and music, all these amazing things, the ethnicities, the diversities that are there and always have been there and have continued to intermix, it's very difficult to say that one territory must belong to one ethnicity. This has been the source of a lot of the conflict in the region for a very long time. There was the possibility that all of the countries in the Balkans could have become communist, that they could all have become allied with the Soviet Union. If all of the Balkans had become communist, and if the communists had won in the Greece Civil War, it's entirely possible that maybe, they would have wanted to unite the Macedonian ancient territory into one modern political division, if not its own eventual nation state. But since the Greek Civil War was not won by the communists, Greece remained a democracy and, of course, became part of the NATO alliance. The NATO part's going to be important for later. While there continued to exist a region called Macedonia, not in the nation-state of Greece, which also had its own region called Macedonia, was irritating to the Greeks through the 20th century, but as Yugoslavia remained within its own borders, the Greeks weren't that concerned about it. But once Yugoslavia broke apart into its constituent republics, one of them that claimed independence was the now Republic of Macedonia. That wasn't okay with the Greeks because they saw it as a potential resurgence of the irredentist movement. What's irredentist mean? It does not mean that you're some person who studies and heals teeth. Irredentist essentially means give that land back to me. It's often closely associated with nationalism. However, in history and even modern times, when some people have said, hey, those people, they're my ethnicity and they speak my language, but they're not in my nation state. We should all make it one nation state. That's irredentism. One could perhaps say that the union of Germany into one nation state, as well as Italy in the 19th century, that those were irredentist. And you could certainly say that Nazi Germany's attempt to annex parts of German-speaking, say, Czechoslovakia, that was also irredentist. The idea is one language, one ethnicity, one flag, and all those things. So what happened when the Republic of Macedonia announced its existence in the 1990s? Well, Greece said, no, United Nations, you're not allowed to let a country that calls itself Macedonia into the United Nations. Now, people in the Balkans have a pretty long memory, obviously going back 2.5 millennia to Alexander the Great. That's how important he is to them. That's a pretty long memory, but also of the past centuries. So the Greeks were concerned, this Macedonia, they might try and get our land. That's also part of the ancient Macedonian Republic. How likely or not that was in the 90s or the aughts or the teens, I don't really know. As far as I can tell, the Republic of Macedonia made no attempt to take any of Greece's territory. But while the people of the new Republic of Macedonia may have spared the sword, they didn't spare the pen, continuing to cite connections to ancient Macedonia. Now, they have done this through a number of interesting ways. In what is perhaps one of the most incredible acts of trolling another country I've ever seen, the people of the Republic of Macedonia continue to erect statues to Philip II and Alexander the Great all over, as well as naming schools and institutions after those ancient and famous leaders. Why? In order to increase their connection to some guy that died 2,400 years ago. Now, I get that wanting to connect the modern world with something in antiquity is something that even the ancient peoples did. In Latin, a synonym for the word better is antiquus, more ancient. So I understand why people today would want to claim some sort of ancient ancestry or connection or linguistic connection. Where it has gotten out of hand, however, is how people in the Republic of Macedonia, up to the present day, have insisted that Alexander the Great and the Kingdom of Macedonia, that they were ethnically Slavic and that they spoke a Slavic language. Now, that's what I call a whole bunch of nonsense. Why is that nonsense? Ethnically Slavic and linguistically Slavic peoples didn't even come into the Balkans until the 6th century AD. So 4th century BC, 1,000 years later. So 1,000 years after Alexander the Great is when we actually had the first Slavs in the Balkans. Therefore, whatever language Alexander the Great and his father Philip II spoke, or the language of the court, or the language of the common people in that area, it was not Slavic. By the way, what is the language of this Republic of Macedonia that came to exist in the 1990s? Well, there is this beautiful continuum of languages or dialects in the Balkans. There's in fact a whole Sprachbund, but we'll talk about that later. The really interesting thing is that the various languages in the Balkans that are Slavic are closely related. There is some degree of mutual intelligibility, and that the divisions among them, calling some dialects or languages, as I discussed in the dialect versus languages video, whether these are languages or dialects of the same language is a matter of national identity more than it is a matter of some kind of linguistic definition. Linguistics can easily say that, oh, well, English and Chinese are different languages, but it can't easily say that Cantonese and Mandarin are different languages or just two dialects of the same language, because it depends on what are you considering: vocabulary, intelligibility, grammar, all kinds of different factors. So for the sake of simplicity, I think it's fine to call the language of this Republic of Macedonia that came in the 1990s, of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, as a language. And I'm just going to call it Macedonian, modern Macedonian, for simplicity. Of course, that modern Macedonian language has no connection to the ancient language of the Kingdom of Macedonia. The language spoken in the Kingdom of Macedonia was almost certainly a dialect of the classical Greek language, related to Doric, in fact, just looking at the Pella tablet as well as many names and other inscriptions. But it's possible in that kingdom other languages were spoken, like Illyrian, but that doesn't mean that was the language spoken by Alexander the Great. In fact, it's unlikely that it was something like Illyrian. Here's another way that the people of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia trolled the Greeks. In the 1970s, a tomb was discovered that belonged either to Philip II, the father of Alexander the Great, or his brother Philip III, and on it is a beautiful relief of Ilios, of the sun god, and thus this design, since the 1970s, has come to be known as the Ilios tis Verginas, the Virgina sun, also known as the Argead sun. Now, while this design can be found elsewhere in ancient Greek art, that is to say, it's perfectly evidence that the Vergina sun is simply an artistic, stylistic motif that was used throughout ancient Greek civilization from the 6th century BC to the 2nd century century AD. Thanks to the discovery of this Macedonian tomb in the 1970s with the Vergina sun on it, it became so closely and immediately associated with the ancient kingdom of Macedonia right before its conquest of Greece and of most of the known world, that this became the symbol of Alexander the Great, of Philip II. This must be the royal symbol of the ancient kingdom of Macedonia. Now, the jury's out on whether or not that is a reasonable interpretation or not. But it didn't stop the Greeks living in the Greek region of Macedonia to say, hey, look at this cool thing. This is our ancient symbol. And therefore, the people to the north of the Greek border, in the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, also decided to adopt it, and they put it on their flag when they became an independent republic in the 1990s. This highly irritated the Greeks, and the Greeks were able to get the Macedonians to change their sign into this one, which happens to look like the Japanese imperial flag, or indeed its naval ensign, but there it is.
There it is. There it is. There it is.
Well, there it is. There it is.
Well, there it is.
So the Greeks forced the people of the Republic of Macedonia to change their flag. How did they do that? By complaining so loudly and so incessantly in the early 1990s, whenever the flag was in the United Nations or the Olympic Games or in offices, in places where there are significant groups of Greek immigrants like Australia and the United States. And through this constant complaining, the Greeks succeeded in making this young republic change its flag. Amazing. Not only that, the Greeks detected language in the constitution of the Republic of Macedonia as being inherently irredentist, like it's trying to take our land. Maybe? Oh, the Greeks got back at them, though. The Republic of Macedonia, which has its capital in Skopje, they decided to call the people of the Republic of Macedonia Skopjans instead of Macedonians because they saw Macedonians as inherently Greek and can only be in the territory of Greece. Because of the incessant complaining of the Greeks, people around the world decided not to call the Republic of Macedonia the Republic of Macedonia, but have done kind of like what I've been doing mostly in this video, calling it the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, in order to avoid offending the Greeks. Now, as you know on this channel, I have no problem offending Greeks from time to time, especially when it comes to language, but
well, there it is now.
This country of Macedonia also wanted to become a part of NATO, but Greece said, no, they're not allowed in NATO until they change their name. So this is how Greece was able to force the Prespa agreement. In 2018, unable to take the onslaught of any more Greek complaining, the Republic of Macedonia officially changed its name to the Republic of North Macedonia, or North Macedonia for short. That has been enough to satisfy the Greeks, kind of, I think, and because of that, North Macedonia is now a member of NATO, right along with Greece and many other countries. Now, like I said, I'm not from the Balkans. I don't have a dog in this fight. I wouldn't even put a dog into a dog fight. That's inhumane. Superficially, I see this as two countries trolling each other. Again, my audience today, if any Greeks or North Macedonians wandered in, hi, this video wasn't really meant for you, but you're very welcome to go ahead and comment where you think I went wrong. I'm sure you would do so without my even giving that permission. On the surface, to me, this looks so silly. Really, Greece? Is my initial reaction to all of this. You forced a country to change its name to something slightly different? Why? Just because you were afraid that the name of the country meant they were trying to steal some parts of your national identity? And why do you care about Macedonia? Oh, because it was the kingdom of Alexander the Great? Even though the classical ancient Greeks that you mostly think of, like, say, the Athenians, they didn't have very high regard for them anyway. So what's going on? Why do you care that much? And you care that much in order to change their flag, to change their name, to not even call them by the name they call themselves? That seems really petty. On the other side, I can sympathize if the Greeks wanted to prevent some kind of land grab of a significant part of their territory, especially since they got the borders that they did out of the Second Balkan War. While there are obvious ethnic and linguistic majorities in certain areas, where you draw borders is pretty arbitrary. So I get that sense of insecurity and why naming themselves Macedonians might make you worry for your own Macedonians in the north part of your country. So I get that. As for the North Macedonians, guys, I think it's really lousy how the Greeks constantly complained when you were just trying to pay homage to ancient figures who once ruled the territory that composes part of your country. That's not necessarily different than there being a Naples, Florida, or a Rome, New York. It's not like those cities are trying to claim some kind of connection to Italy. On the other hand, the reason that the Socialist Republic of Macedonia had that name was because of the United Macedonia movement in the early 20th century, which continues to this day, and enough people in North Macedonia to cause concern insist that the ancient language that was in the Kingdom of Macedonia was Slavic, or the origin of the Macedonian language, and all these other kinds of nonsensical things that are completely false. Well, that's pretty reprehensible. Probably better to have a good, strong sense of actual history rather than just, believing what others have made up, because that's the only way to at least come to some sort of consensus about these sorts of things. But it looks like you did that. Kind of. North Macedonia and Greece are now just happy neighbors. Gumdrop smiles all around, right? Now, the colorful interpretations of history, you can see all of them in the comments of the original video on the part of the North Macedonians or other non-Greeks. Very interesting stuff. Take a comment like this. The name of Greece was never mentioned in any official historical document before 1832, when this fake country was made from Bavarian aristocracy, and everything from Macedonian heritage was brutally stolen and claimed as Greek and Hellenic, which is the fake propaganda until today. Well, that is, of course, wrong and nonsense, because all you have to do is type the word Graicus or Graiki in this website, which shows you all of the classical Roman texts. And look, name of Greece. Even this wonderful line by Horace, Graecia capta ferum victorem cepit. So yeah, Greece as an idea, as a geographical region, as a language and ethnicity and all those sorts of things are well established deep into antiquity. Now, the dear commenter here may be talking about the idea that inhabitants of Greece and of Anatolia, they thought of themselves as Romans for a very long time, and they might not have had the same kind of Greek national identity as today. But not all the Greeks in the comments acquitted themselves very well either. For example, we Greeks don't expect other peoples to teach our history. History, even the word is Greek. We know who Alexander was, who was his grandfather, his father, his mother, his cousin, and his whole family. Alexander conquered almost all of Asia and left Greek inscriptions everywhere in the Greek language, by which I assume this person means, therefore, his native language must have been Greek. Now, the incredible diversity of the languages or dialects of ancient Greek is just extraordinary, and it would spin the head of pretty much anyone who hadn't studied them in detail. Ancient Greek was not unified linguistically, for sure. The fact that Alexander the Great and the other Macedonian administrators administrated in Attic Greek is because that was the prestige language, but it definitely wasn't their native dialect up there in the Kingdom of Macedonia. In the previous century, Attic had become the language to learn and to speak and to write in, displacing Ionic, as Herodotus wrote in. Just the fact that he and Philip had Greek names doesn't mean that the language they spoke was Attic, what you're calling Greek. It is conceivably possible that Philip II and Alexander the Great and all the people of the Kingdom of Macedonia, they spoke some Indo-European language that was not closely related to the ancient Greek dialects, and that then they would have still adopted the prestige language of the region, which was Classical Attic, and spread that everywhere. The evidence, however, that we have available, like the Pella tablet, indicates that the most likely language there was some dialect related to Northwest Greek or Doric. But we don't have a lot of inscriptional evidence to prove that. The evidence that exists suggests Greek-like. It does not suggest non-Greek. So Greeks, you have to really check yourself. when it comes to this. There is no doubt that Alexander the Great and Philip II are vital figures in the history of the Greek language, in the history of Greek culture, civilization, but we could find evidence that they spoke something very different. It's entirely possible we could find a huge corpus of things written in a non-Greek language that pertain to the Kingdom of Macedonia, which could convince us that, oh, maybe that Pella tablet was the exception, not the rule. We just don't have that much evidence. But the evidence we do have, like I said, leans towards Greek as the answer. So that is my very superficial summary of an incredibly complex historical, cultural topic. Anything to have to do with the Balkans is pretty messy, but man, all the languages and all the amazing diversity in the Balkans is so interesting. I wish I had the time to learn all the languages and learn the history in much more detail. So if I oversimplified anything or got stuff wrong, in your opinion, you just go ahead and let me know in the comments. That's fine. That's what it's there for. Please be respectful to me as well as to one another, and we can all hopefully live one day in perfect peace under rainbow skies. Charitas polas yuminecho. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time. Walete uyainete.
Well, there it is.